بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم طهر قلوبنا من النفاق وأعمالنا من الرياء وألسنتنا من الكذب وعيوننا من الخيانة فإنك تعلم خائنة الأعين وما تخفي الصدور أما بعد Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, this is our first gathering after Ramadan, and usually we gather here Friday nights, and we have our regular program that we were doing before Ramadan. We'll be starting that up next week, inshallah. However, tonight we're gathering for something different. We're gathering for the intention of dua for our brothers and sisters in Palestine, as well as any other place in the world where people are oppressed or beleaguered or facing difficulty or harm. And this is a really common practice in different parts of the Muslim world. People come together, they engage in communal dua and remembrance, praying for the oppressed. This is a very common practice, and that's why we're gathering, for that intention. So before we begin, I just want to give a few remarks about what exactly we are doing. The intention was to gather, as I said, for making dua for our brothers and sisters in Palestine. And today they announced this ceasefire, and as all of you know, it's not the mark of the end of a conflict. It's simply a temporary measure. And even today, with the ceasefire in place, there are still aggressions against our brothers and sisters at Al-Aqsa. So, just because of the ceasefire doesn't mean we don't continue to pray for them and use other means of supporting them in this time. And one of the things that we can do very easily is make dua. And as I said in the khutbah about Palestine, the dua is one of the strongest means. It is one of the asbab, one of the means of victory, one of the means of divine assistance. And it should not be belittled because it's just dua. As I had said in the khutbah, if a person's initial reaction to the suggestion of making dua as a means is to belittle it, that indicates that their dua is not that important to them, so they belittle their own dua. It's so lacking in their own life that when it's suggested to them for making dua for other people, they belittle it. But dua is very powerful, as the Prophet ﷺ said, that dua is the silahul mu'min, it's the weapon of the believer. But as the weapon, as the Imams say, the weapon is only as strong as the hand that wields it. Back then they're talking about swords. The sword, as sharp as it may be, is only going to be as effective as the hand that wields it. So the hand that is wielding the sword is actually more important than the sword itself. So the dua is the weapon of the believer. But for that weapon to be wielded and used properly, the hand has to be skilled. And here the hand is not referring to the actual human hand, it's talking about the heart. It's talking about presence when making dua. Because we often have a very robotic way of making dua. It's common. It's a common struggle we deal with. Because we get used to patterns and they become customary, you know. Like you see someone and you say Assalamu alaikum, and they say Wa alaikum salam, and what's the next thing you say? How are you? And what do you say? Alhamdulillah. And what do they say? Alhamdulillah. And it's just formalities. Right? So we have to accustom ourselves to making real dua from the heart. Because the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah does not accept the dua min qalbin ghafilin wahin, from a heart that is heedless and oblivious. They're just parroting words. Now, so a couple of remarks before we begin. We wanted to gather and recite the dua al-Nasiri. And this dua is in Arabic, and not everyone knows Arabic, and even those who know Arabic, a lot of what is said may not be 100% clear. So we have translations, alhamdulillah. There is a translation available. You can find it online. or you can purchase the book. It's called The Prayer of the Oppressed. This is the translation of Dua al-Nasiri by Sheikh Ahmad bin Muhammad al-Nasiri al-Dar'i, and this is done by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. It's a very good translation. It has the Arabic with the English, a lengthy introduction. So if you want to read the English, you can get the book. Or if you type up a Dua al-Nasiri in English, you'll find the translation online. I think some people have posted the translation on its own. And that's good. So the intention is to recite a Dua al-Nasiri of Sheikh Ahmad bin Muhammad al-Nasiri al-Dar'i al-Nasiri, who died in the year 674, Christian era. And after that, to make the dua called Hizb al-Nasr, which is another very powerful dua that was used with the intention of praying that Allah gives victory to those who are oppressed and defeats the oppressors. And this was a dua of Sheikh Abu al-Hasan al-Shadili, rahimahullah ta'ala. And this dua was recited quite frequently by the Muslims in Alexandria, Egypt, during this time when they were fighting against the Crusaders. So it was a dua wielded against the Crusaders. Just as the Dua al-Nasiri was recited in the masajid during the French occupation of Morocco, to the point where the French became very frightened of this dua, and to the point where they banned its recitation in the masajid. People would get in trouble with the law if they were caught reciting this dua in a group setting in the masajid. But people continued to make this dua. And many of those elder Moroccans who were there during that time credit their recitation of this dua, they credit this dua to the expulsion of the French to this dua. Of course, among other means. So this dua is very powerful, and it's really an expression of servitude to Allah Ta'ala, acknowledging one's need and asking for strength, asking for ability, and asking Him to vanquish oppressors. It's very straightforward. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who is the rahmatul alameen, the mercy to the worlds, would at times make dua against specific tribes when they transgressed. And he did this in the Qunut al-Nazila. He mentioned their names. So this is not something that's outside of our tradition. Now, before we begin, just a couple of points. We always say that whenever a person does something, before they do it, they need to know what is the hukum, the ruling in the sharia for that action. Whatever it is that you do in life, you need to know what is the hukum of Allah in that action. And that applies to what we're doing here, right? So I want to bring this out so that you're aware. Making dua, there's two issues. There's making dua in a communal setting, a dua jama'i. The kind of group dua that we see across the world is very common. We don't do it here, but we should from time to time. But dua jama'i after salat, for example. You go to Pakistan, go to India, it's almost seen as wajib. You have to do it, right? It's not wajib, you don't have to do it. But it's an example of a communal dua. Other communal du'as would involve multiple people making the same dua at the same time in a single voice. We just did one of those. What was that? The dhikr that was done in a single voice as a group. What was the last time we did that? Anyone know? The last time we as a group did communal dhikr together in a single voice out loud. The takbirat al-Eid. The takbirat al-Eid are an example of that. So when it comes, there's two issues. There is making dhikr in a group, and then there is making dhikr in a group audibly, or just making dhikr audibly, jahar, out loud. And of course, the ulama have differed about this issue. You know, we should be frank and honest about that. Historically, there were differences of opinion. Some ulama said it's better to just do the dhikr by yourself or with a lower voice. Others said no, it is completely permissible, indeed praiseworthy, to gather, engage in communal dhikr with conditions, such as if you do it in the masjid, you're not doing it in a time that crowds out an obligation like salat. You're not disturbing someone who's sleeping or making i'tikaf in the masjid, and things like that. So generally, across the four madhahib, you have within each of the schools those ulama who permit and indeed encourage what we call communal remembrance or communal group dua. So what we are doing is not accepted by every single scholar throughout history, but it's accepted by the majority over most of our Islamic history. So I wanted to say that because people have their positions. You know, people may not be comfortable with that, and that's fine. If they don't want to do that, they don't have to. So if a person is comfortable with following qualified scholarship in this issue, well, this is what we do, alhamdulillah. And those who are not comfortable, alhamdulillah, no one is objecting to the other in this issue, because it is something mukhtalaf fihi, it's different over. Even if we say that the stronger position is permissibility with conditions. So, Dua al-Nasiri of Imam al-Arif Billah Ahmad bin Muhammad al-Nasiri al-Dar'i, he wrote this dua and transmitted this dua, and his students memorized it, and it was something, it's very widespread in North Africa, and it spread beyond North Africa after his time. We're going to read this inshallah, and after that we're going to read Hizb al-Nasr. Hizb al-Nasr is included after Dua al-Nasiri, here in the back. It's one page and something. There's also a translation of this available online if you type up Hizb al-Nasr, which is the litany of victory. That's, or the prayer of victory. That's what it's called. And this is also a very powerful dua. The ulama say that it's haram for you to make this dua and intend a Muslim. It has to be intended towards belligerent, disbelieving enemies who are oppressing you. You can't make this dua against someone who's a Muslim who's upset you. You don't make these du'as against Muslims. You make them against oppressors who are outside of the deen. Alright? This Dua al-Nasiri is written in a poem in Arabic, and it's on a particular meter. You know poetic meters? You have in English and you have in Arabic, the bahar. The bahar that this uses, or the poetic meter, is called rajiz. Rajiz is the most common poetic meter in Arabic, because it's the easiest one to use and read. It's the most common one, and it's called the donkey of the poets, because it can be used for anything. It's very easy. And in ancient Arabia, the camel drivers, you know, they're riding camels, and for a long time they need to sing to them to keep them active. This person is called the Hadi. The Hadi is the one who sings the songs and the poems to keep the camels active. So the Hadi would most often read poetry in this meter. So it's quite easy. And one disclaimer, I'm not a singer, right? Though we're reading it in a somewhat melodious way, because that makes it easier. I'm not a singer, so don't expect any kind of vocal performances like Sheikh Shamsa. Right? If he was here, I'd ask him to lead it. But we'll read it, inshallah, in a very particular way that's easy to follow, inshallah. But before we begin, just gather your heart with the intention that this dua is from the heart. If you don't understand all of the words, you'll read the word, you'll read the translation, inshallah. Know that it is a pure expression of neediness to Allah and asking for His victory. And inshallah, maybe we'll read some of the translation if we have time after this. Inshallah, try to follow along audibly, so I'm not the only one here reading this out loud. إلى حضرة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. صراط غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. يا من إلى رحمته المفاق ومن إليه يلجأ المضطر، ويا قريب العفو يا مولاه، ويا مغيث كل من دعاه، فيك استغثنا يا مغيث الضعفاء، فحسبنا يا ربي أنت وكفى، فلا أجل من عظيم قدرتك ولا أعز من عزيز سطوتك، بعز ملكك الملوك تخضع، تخفض قدر من تشاء وترفع، والأمر كله إليك رده، وبيديك حله وعقده، وقد رفعنا أمرنا إليك، وقد شكونا ضعفنا عليك، فارحمنا يا من لا يزال عالما بضعفنا ولا يزال راحما، انظر إلى ما مسنا من الورى، فحالنا من بينهم كما ترى، قد قل جمعنا وقل وقرنا، وانحط بين الجموع قدرنا، واستضعفونا شوكة وشدة، واستنقصونا عدة وعدة، فنحن يا من ملكه لا يسلم، لذنا بجاهك الذي لا يغلب، إليك يا غوث الفقير نستند، عليك يا كهف الضعيف نعتمد، أنت الذي ندعو لكشف الغمارات، أنت الذي نرجو لدافع الحسرات، أنت العناية التي لا نرتجي حماية من غير بابها تجي، أنت الذي نسعى بباب فضله، أكرم من أغنى بفيض نيله، أنت الذي تهدي إذا ضللنا، أنت الذي تعفو إذا زللنا، وسعت كل ما خلقت علما، ورأفة ورحمة وحلما، وليس منا في الوجود أحقار، ولا لما عندك منا أفقار، يا واسع الإحسان يا من خيره عم الورى ولا ينال غيره، يا منقذ الغرق ويا حنان، يا منجي الهلك ويا منان، ضاق النطاق يا سميع يا مجيب، عز الدواء يا سريع يا قريب، وقد مددنا ربنا الأكف، ومنك ربنا رجونا اللطف، فانطف بنا فيما به قضيت، ورضينا بما به رضيت، وأبدل اللهم حال العسر باليسر، وامددنا بريح النصر، واجعل لنا على البغاة الغلبة، واقصر هذا الشر على من طالب، واقهر عيدانا يا عزيز قهرا، يفصم حبلهم ويصم الظهر، واعكس مرادهم وخير سعيهم، واهزم جيوشهم وافسد رايهم، وعجل اللهم فيهم نقمتك، فانهم لا يعجزون قدرتك، يا ربي بحبل عصمتك قد اعتصمنا وبعز نصرتك، فكلنا ولا تكن علينا ولا تكلنا طرفة إلينا، فما أطقنا قوة للدفع ولا استطعنا حيلة للنفع، وما قصدنا غير بابك الكريم وما رجونا غير فضلك العميم، فما رجت من خيرك الظنون بنفسي ما تقول كن يكون، يا ربي بك التوصل لما لديك وبك التوسل، يا ربي أنت ركننا الرفيع، يا ربي أنت حصننا المنيع، يا ربي أنلنا الأمن إذا ارتحلنا وإذا أقمنا، يا ربي واحفظ زرعنا وضرعنا واحفظ تجارنا ووفر جمعنا، واجعل بلادنا بلاد الدين وراحة المحتاج والمسكين، واجعل لها بين البلاد صولا وحرمة ومنعة ودولة، واجعل من السر المصون عزها واجعل من الستر الجميل حرزها، واجعل بصاد وبقاف وبين ألف حجاب من ورائها يكون، بجاه نور وجهك الكريم وجاه سر ملكك العظيم وجاه لا إله إلا الله وجاه خير الخلق يا رباه وجاه ما به دعاك الأنبياء وجاه ما به دعاك الأولياء وجاه قدر القطب والأوتاد وجاه حال الجرس والأفراد وجاه الأخيار وجاه النجابة وجاه الأبدان وجاه النقابة وجاه كل عابد وذاكر وجاه كل حامد وشاكر وجاه كل من رفعت قدره ممن سترت أو نشرت ذكره وجاه آيات الكتاب المحكم وجاه الاسم الأعظم المعظم، يا ربي وقفنا فقارا بين يديك ضعفاء حقارا، وقد دعوناك دعاء من دعا ربا كريما لا يرد من سعى، فاقبل دعاءنا بمحض الفضل قبول من ألغى حساب العدل، وامنن علينا منة الكريم وعطف علينا عطفة الحليم، وانشر علينا يا رحيم رحمتك وابسط علينا يا كريم نعمتك، واخر لنا في سائر الأقوال واختر لنا في سائر الأفعال، يا ربي واجعل دأبنا تمسكا بالسنة الغراء والتنسك، واحصر لنا أغراضنا المختلفة فيك وعرفنا تمام المعرفة، واجمع لنا ما بين علم وعمل واصرف إلى دار البقاء منا الآمل، وانهج بنا يا ربي نهج السعادة واختم لنا يا ربي خاتم الشهادة، واجعل بنينا فضلاء صلاحا وعلماء عاملين نصحا، وأصلح اللهم حال الأهل ويسر اللهم جمع الشمل وافتح فتحك المبين في من تولى وأعز الدين وانصره يا ذا الطول وانصر حزبه واملأ بما يرضيك عنه قلبه يا ربي وانصر ديننا المحمدي واجعل ختام عزه كمهدي يا ربي وانصر ديننا المحمدي واجعل ختام عزه كمهدي ويا ربي وانصر ديننا المحمدي واجعل ختام عزه كمهدي واحفظ يا رب بحفظ العلماء وارفع منار نوره إلى السماء واعف وعافي واكفي واغفر ذنبنا وذنب كل مسلم يا ربنا وصل يا ربي على المختار صلاتك الكاملة المقدار صلاتك التي تفي بأمره كما يليق بارتفاع قدره ثم على الآل الكرام وعلى أصحابه الغر ومن لهم تلا والحمد لله الذي بحمده يبلغ ذو القصد تمام قصده. آمين. I have to read some of the translation just so you have a little bit of the meanings here. So I'll read from the beginning, the middle, and the end, just a little bit from each. So when you read this dua, even if you didn't understand all of the meaning, it's okay. Just say, may Allah accept your intention with its meanings and more. So, he begins by saying, O you whose mercy is a refuge for all those in dire need, who flee to you to lose their woes. O Master of reprieve, whose pardon is so near, you answer all in need, they know that you do hear. We beg for your relief, Redeemer of the weak. You are enough for us, both humbled and so meek. No strength can ever match your awesome majesty. No might can ever breach your just authority. The kings all bow like us to your great sovereignty. You choose whom to abase or raise decisively. Calamities we face are only stopped by you. It's in your hands. They are dissolved within your view. For solace in these states, we turn to you alone, complaining that we cannot make it on our own. Be merciful with us. You know our frailty. O you whose mercy falls like rain unceasingly. And he goes on. This is all praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, expressing these praises of Allah ta'ala, acknowledging our own weakness and our neediness before Him, describing His magnificence and His power. So he says, after all of this praise, at some point he begins to define or express the constriction and the difficulties that's being faced by external enemies. You have to remember, during his time, that was the beginning of the European incursions into the Muslim lands in North Africa. That was the beginning. And he was in a time of great weakness in the Muslim power in North Africa. The kingdom was very weak. There was disunity in fighting. There was a lot of political instability. So he's seeing the external enemy and the weakness inside, much like what we go through, much like what we see for hundreds of years. And he's expressing this neediness. He says, our hands are raised to you, our palms are open wide. We seek sincerely endless grace you do provide. Replace our state of hardship with your gentle ease and guide us with your power's prevailing breeze. He says, overcome our foes with your subduing might, unravel all their hopes and force them to take flight. Deter their evil aims and dash their unjust plan. Repel them from our gates and mystify each man. Be swift in justice, Lord, in this our anxious hour, for they cannot remove an atom of your power. O Lord, by holding on to your most gracious rope, we bind it to our faith and knot it to our hope. So stand for us today. Don't counter what we try. Forsake us not, O Lord, the blinking of an eye. We're powerless to stop this onslaught of their force, or strategize to benefit our country's course. We seek no good except what flows from your wide door, and yearn for grace that comes from your unending more. And he continues, he's now praying for the lands, and what we call al-ibad wal-bilad, the servants of the lands. He says, secure our hearts within your glorious defense, in restless journeys far or in our residence. Protect our herds, preserve our crops, increase our gains, and give and bless our commerce with approving rains. Fill our land with good prosperity, release our citizens from dire poverty. Establish righteous rule while granting noble station with high respect and dignity in every nation. So he's praying for the lands, for economic strength, for spiritual strength, for military strength, for social strength. This is what he's praying for, to have a dawla, as he says, meaning a polity. So he's making all of these prayers, and then he concludes the dua by saying, envelop us, O Lord, within your mercy sea, and rain on us your grace that falls abundantly. From all our words and deeds, choose those that remain, the highest and the best, so heaven is our gain. O plenitude, fill our lives and hearts with pure devotion, in perfect harmony with your prophet's generous ocean, and bring us to focus all our aims into a single goal, complete and blissful knowledge of you within our soul. Let us always act, Lord, in accord with Ahmad's way, Sunnah, directing all our hopes to a joyful judgment day. Always lead us, Lord, to what is right and true, the path real martyrs take and those who gaze on you. Raise our children up as brave and pious scholars, who base their days on your sweet light as true exemplars. And unify the hearts of family and of friends, facilitate for us in making our amends. O Lord, bestow a clear, decisive victory on all who aid this way and restore its dignity. And he concludes, and this goes into 71 lines. He sends the salat and salams upon the Prophet ﷺ and upon the family and companions, and concludes with Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. So you have a glimpse in the translation. It's a very beautiful translation. It uses some poetic license in the translation because you hear the rhyme in English. That's no easy task, to make an Arabic poem that rhymes, translated into English that also rhymes and is accurate. This is very difficult to do. And for that reason, when you compare the two, there's some poetic license, meaning Sheikh Hamza uses some words in English that aren't exactly found in the original, but it's 80, 90% in the ballpark figure. So it's an accurate translation. Okay. So this is a dua al-Nasiri, and as I told you, this was the practice of people in North Africa. They would gather in the masajid and read this dua. Most of them had memorized it because they would read it so frequently. So when you memorize the dua, it's different, you know. You memorize the dua and you know what it means. You begin to say it with the emotion, with the intensity of sincerity that's different from trying to follow along when reading from a text. But we come with a niyyah that whatever is expressed in this dua, we ask Allah for that, for ourselves and the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, even if in the moment of reading it, we're not fully getting all of that. So we come with that niyyah, and inshallah, Allah fulfills that niyyah on our behalf. The next dua is called Hizb al-Nasr, and as I mentioned earlier, this dua called a Hizb here is one of the du'as written by Sheikh Abu al-Hasan al-Shadili, rahimahullah ta'ala. He was a very famous scholar and master in Egypt. He's not originally from Egypt. He's originally from Umara, which is in north of Morocco in the mountains. And he has a long story, and he has many students. And among his students were Sultan al-Ulama al-Izz ibn Abd al-Salam, one of the great scholars of Egypt, and many others. This dua was recited quite frequently by the Muslims when they were encountering the Crusaders in northern Egypt, in Alexandria. You're talking about a coastal area, so they're dealing with these incursions. And this dua was recited to great effect. When you compare a dua al-Nasiri to Hizb al-Nasr, you have to say that Hizb al-Nasr is a lot more intense. If we say that dua is the weapon of the believer, then dua al-Nasri is just standard weaponry, and this is advanced weaponry, at least in the meanings, because it's very intense. And this is also translated into English. I don't have it offhand, but inshallah we'll express some of the meanings we can. This is not a poem, so we're not reading it in a rhyming fashion or in the same way. So just try to read along, and we'll explain some of the meanings, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma bi sadwati jabaruti qahrik wa bi sur'ati iqafati nasrik wa bi ghayratika li intihaki hurumatik wa bi himayatika liman ihtama bi ayatik. نسألك يا الله يا قريب يا سميع يا مجيب يا سريع يا جبار يا منتقم يا قهار يا شديد البطش يا من لا يعجزه قهر الجبابرة ولا يعظم عليه هلاك المتمردة من الملوك الأكاسرة أن تجعل كيد من كان لي في نحري ومكر من مكر بي عائدا علي وحفرة من حفر لي واقعا فيها ومن نصب لي شبكة الخداع اجعله يا سيدي مساقا إليها ومصادا فيها وأسيرا لديها. اللهم بحق كافها يا عين صاد اكفنا هم العدا ونقهم الردى واجعلهم لكل حبيب فدا وسلط عليهم عاجل النقمة في اليوم والغدا. اللهم بدل شملهم اللهم بدل شملهم اللهم فرق جمعهم اللهم قلل عددهم اللهم فل حدهم اللهم اجعل الدائرة عليهم اللهم أوصل العذاب إليهم اللهم أخرجهم عن دائرة الحلم واسلبهم مدد الإمهال وغل أيديهم واشدد على قلوبهم ولا تبلغهم الآمال. اللهم مزقهم كل ممزق مزقته لأعدائك انتصارا لأنبيائك ورسلك وأوليائك. اللهم انتصر لنا انتصارك لأحبابك على أعدائك اللهم انتصر لنا انتصارك لأحبابك على أعدائك اللهم انتصر لنا انتصارك لأحبابك على أعدائك. اللهم لا تمكن الأعداء فينا ولا تسلطهم علينا بذنوبنا. اللهم لا تمكن الأعداء فينا ولا تسلط علينا بذنوبنا. اللهم لا تمكن الأعداء فينا ولا تسلطهم علينا بذنوبنا. حاميم 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 حاميم. حم الأمر وجاء النصر فعلينا لا ينصرون. حاميم عين سين قاف حمايتنا ووقايتنا مما نخاف. اللهم قنا شر الأسوأ ولا تجعلنا محلا للبلوى. اللهم من نسأله بفضله لفضله أعطنا أمل الرجاء وفوق الأمل ياه 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 نسألك العجل إلهي الإجابة يا من أجاب نوحا في قومه يا من نصر إبراهيم على أعدائه يا من رد يوسف على يعقوب يا من كشف ضر أيوب يا من أجاب دعوة زكريا يا من قبل تسبيح يونس بن متى نسألك بأسرار أصحاب هذه الدعوات المستجابات أن تقبل منا ما به دعوناك وأن تعطنا ما سألناك أنجز لنا وعدك الذي وعدته لعبادك المؤمنين لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين انقطعت آمالنا وعزتك إلا منك وخاب رجاؤنا وحقك إلا فيك إن أبطأت غارة الأرحام وابتعدت فأقرب الشيء منا غارة الله يا غارة الله جد السير مسرعة في حل عقدتنا يا غارة الله حل عقد من ربطوا وشتت شمل أقوام بنا اختلطوا الله أكبر سيف الله قاطعهم وكل ما علوا في أمرهم هبطوا يا غارة الله علت العادون وجاءوا ورجونا الله مجيرا وكفى بالله وليا وكفى بالله نصيرا حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم سلام على نوح في العالمين استجب لنا آمين 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 فقطع دابر القوم الذين ظلموا والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين والحمد لله رب العالمين. This dua, Hizb al-Nasr, is like dua al-Nasiri. It's an expression of servitude, but for those of you who know Arabic, there's a few of you, it's a lot more intense because he's asking Allah in a variety of different ways to essentially vanquish oppressors. Very straightforward. He asks Allah Ta'ala by His overwhelming might and His power and His assistance and by His wrath and anger at those who violate His sanctities. It's as if He's saying, Oh Allah, O you who is angered and wrathful over those who violate your sanctities. And then He asks for this victory, calling upon Allah Ta'ala with His beautiful names. In the beginning, we ask you, O Allah, Ya Qareeb, O close or near, Ya Sami', O all-hearing, Ya Mujib, O responder, Ya Sari', O you who are swift to respond, Ya Jabbar, O overpowerer, Ya Muntaqim, O vengeful, Ya Qahhar, O overpowering and dominating, Ya Shadid al-Batsh, O you who is severe in seizing or grasping, taking to account. O you in the face of whose power no tyrants can come to you, no tyrants can face you and survive. He starts the dua like this, and then he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to vanquish and destroy tyrants and oppressors, and to take their plots and turn them around on them so that they fall into their own plots. That whatever traps they set for others, that they fall into those traps. This is what he's asking Allah for. And then he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to set against them His imminent punishment. We ask Allah for mercy and for guidance for everyone. But at some point, if you're in a situation like the Crusades, in that situation, the Shaykh is making this dua, you're asking Allah for victory. If people people are guided, alhamdulillah, but in that situation, you need victory, and you make dua for them to be vanquished. And then he says, oh Allah, scatter their forces, disperse their strength, weaken their unity, diminish their numbers. And then he says, take them from the domain of hilm, meaning take them from any ease, any forbearance, take them from that, and remove from them any imhal, waslubhum madad al-imhal, which means take them out of that state where you give them time to continue. Seize them now. Seize them now, not later. This is what he's asking for. And then he continues in different ways, making some of the same du'as. And then he says Hamim 7 times. People wonder, what is that about? Hamim this here is from the Quran. The Hawamim chapters, the chapters that begin with Hamim among the disjoint letters. He says Hamim 7 times. What is that about? The ulama mentioned that Hamim here, it is Hamim from the Quran, but it's according to the interpretation that Hamim is shorthand for Himaya. And Himaya means protection and security. And the intention is that, as the Mashayikh say, when a person recites Hamim like this, they intend Himaya, asking Allah for Himaya, divine protection and security. Why 7 times? They say that when you recite it, the intention is that you say it once for each direction. How many directions are there? How many cardinal directions? 4. But then you have up, above, and you have below. That makes 6. And then inside of the heart, Himaya for your inner state, that's 7. So it's as if you're saying, when you say Habib 7 times, it's as if you're saying, oh Allah, I ask you for your divine protection and security to my left, to my right, to my left, in front of me, behind me, above me, below me, and inside of me. That's what is intended here. And then he recites from ayat of Quran that express this dua for victory and aid. And then he says further on, he says, answer our dua, ya Allah. Answer it swiftly. He says, oh you, and this is in my opinion the most beautiful part of the dua. He says, oh Allah, answer our dua, answer our dua, answer our dua. Oh you who answered Nuh when he made dua against his people. Oh you who gave victory to Ibrahim over his enemies. Oh you who returned Yusuf to Yaqub. Oh you who removed the pain and suffering from Ayyub. Oh you who answered the dua of Zakaria. Oh you who accepted the glorification of Yunus ibn Matta, which is what? Subhanaka la ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu min al-zalimin, which he mentions here in this dua as well. And then at the end he says, we have no hopes. Our hopes are dashed, utterly dashed, in anything and anyone except for you. We have no hope in anything or anyone except for you. You know, in these situations, like we're seeing in the world today, people think, oh, this may happen, that may happen, this world power may step in, this ceasefire may take effect or may not take effect, they may make this deal or that deal. You use means, yes, but at the same time, have these means not been used before? So hearts are saying, yeah, Allah, we use the means, but we don't have any hope in any of these things. We have to turn to you and for rescue, for victory, for aid. And then he closes the dua with some basic dhikr, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel, which is very important to say in these days. And La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-ali al-azim. And then he closes it with the salat and salams upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's a very powerful dua, and it's a mujarrab, it's tried and true, you know. But again, it's Dua is the weapon of the believer, but it's only as powerful as the hand that wields it. So we make these du'as with the intention of taking from the words of these illustrious scholars and saintly figures to make dua using their words, because they express it far better than we can with our feeble tongues. There's a narration, it's not a hadith, but it's sometimes taken as one. And it says, "Iduruni, call upon me with a tongue that has not disobeyed me." And what that means, there's a lot of meanings, but one of the meanings is, if you make the dua in the words of those who really know how to make dua, who really express that servitude, you learn from them how to make dua for yourself and asking Allah for these things. So we read these du'as not because we're parrots, just parroting what is written down. We read the du'as because they express very lofty meanings, very great expressions of neediness and asking Allah Ta'ala for victory. So in reading them like this, it helps to develop within us an understanding of what we should be praying for. When we pray for ourselves and our families and for the ummah, for the people of Palestine and elsewhere. So we ask Allah Ta'ala to accept our dua and to take every single meaning in this dua, both the dua Nasiri and Hizb al-Nasr, every single meaning, and answer it directly for us and for our families and for the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, for the people of Palestine, for the people of the Quds al-Sharif, to give them relief and to give them victory, real victory, right? In the class we do this time every Friday, we've been talking about the signs of the Day of Judgment. Everything that's unfolding in Al-Quds is part of that process. It really is. Because all of the events we read about in the major signs of the Day of Judgment, many of these major signs are unfolding, or going to unfold, in Al-Quds. In Al-Quds. So it ties into our class here to pay attention to what's going on and to continue to make the dua. Ceasefire, no ceasefire. The dua, even if things go quiet for months or even years. Because though it may go quiet for us in that we don't hear about it in the media, it's not quiet for the people living there. You know, they go through daily indignities, daily acts of oppression. And even if it's not mentioned in the media, it's still going on. We don't want to be reactionary. To some extent, we do react when things occur, of course. But we don't want to be reactionary where we don't make dua for people. We don't make dua for the people of Palestine, except when something comes in the news. No, we make dua for them when things come in the news and outside of the news cycle, and dua for the ummah in general, and dua for ourselves. Because I believe, and Allah knows best, that we are nearing that time, if we're not in that time, where the Prophet ﷺ said that al-qabidu ala dinihi kal-qabdi ala jamr. The one who's clinging to his deen is like a person clinging to a hot coal. Take a hot coal. Try to hold it in your hand. It's very difficult. I think we're in that time, or we're nearing that time, because it's an age of perplexity. It's an age of tremendous, rapid changes that we can hardly keep up with. And they're perplexing. And the only thing we have is dua at the end of the day, is turning to Allah Ta'ala. We only have Allah. The Prophet ﷺ said that in the last days, when times get tough, he says, no one's going to be saved when the fitan emerge, except the one who calls upon Allah Ta'ala like a drowned person is calling out for help. This is what the hadith says, quoted by Imam al-Tabarani. كَدُعَاء الْغَرِيقِ, the one who's drowning. Imagine how they're going to scream and call out and beg for help in that moment when they're panicking. He says that is the person who will be saved in that time. So how do you do that? Well, you have to cultivate it. You have to work at it and just expressing that neediness. And we learn that in these kinds of du'as. So don't just read the du'a here. Take it, read it at other times. Get the translation, inshallah. Other du'as from the sunnah, read them. There are other du'as for victory and help. And just open-ended dua from your own words as you learn these expressions and you get an understanding of how to express those needs. Ask Allah for yourself, for the ummah, and inshallah, Allah answers those du'as. I shouldn't even say inshallah, you know. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that when you make the du'a, don't be indecisive. And some of the ulama say that it's wrong. It's an error to make a du'a and say inshallah. Oh Allah, give me Jannah, inshallah. Well, don't say inshallah. Allah gives you when He wills, if He wills. It's already by Allah's will. But don't make it like it's some thing, like it may happen, it may not happen. Have some certainty, right? Someone came to my office today, and we were talking about this. Said in Arabic, when you want to say, may Allah reward you, what do you say? Jazakallahu khairan. When you want to say, may Allah bless you, anyone knows the dua? Huh? Barakallahu feek. Barakallahu feek. When you want to ask Allah to answer your dua, when you raise up from the ruku', the Imam, what does he say? Sami Allahu liman hamida. Right? Notice that all of these are past tense verbs. Barakallahu feek. Baraka is fi'l madi. It's past tense verb. Jazakallah. Jaza is a past tense verb. Right? Sami'a, past tense verb. Why are our du'as often past tense verbs? When you say to someone, may Allah reward you, is that past, present, or future? It's future, isn't it? May Allah bless you. That's future, meaning after you make the dua, inshallah, they're blessed. So it comes after the dua. So why are we making dua for something that would be answered in the future using past tense verbs? Why are all these du'as in the past tense? The ulama say the reason why they're in the past tense is because it's as if Allah has already answered them. And that's why you put them in the past tense. Barakallahu feek, may Allah bless you, is literally Allah has blessed you. Jazakallahu khairan is literally Allah has rewarded you with goodness. So have some certainty. Ad'uhu wa anta mustayqin bil ijaba, as it says in the hadith. Make dua with certainty that the answer is forthcoming. One of the things, and I end with this, is that when you feel inspired to make dua, the inspiration to make dua is from Allah. And the inspiration to make the dua is the sign that the dua is accepted. So remember that. If you feel a moment to say, oh Allah, bless so and so, that inspiration that came is an indication that Allah is answering that dua because He inspired your tongue to say it. He inspired the heart to think about it, to intend it, and the tongue to say it. So we shouldn't be so indecisive in thinking, oh, I make all these du'as, but Allah's not going to answer. Maybe He's not. Have some yaqeen. Inshallah, Allah will give us that tawfiq. And, we keep saying inshallah in matters where we shouldn't say inshallah because we're used to saying it. Allah will answer the dua of the da'i, the one who makes dua. Right? This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. قُلْ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. Say, ادْعُونِي, call upon me, I answer you. I answer you. Allah has answered us in inspiring us to come here and to read this dua. So the dua is answered inshallah in the manner of Allah's choosing, in the way of His choosing, and in the timing that Allah chooses. Even if you make the dua and it doesn't come like that, it doesn't mean that the delay is a denial. It's not. A lot of people think this. They think I make dua for something over and over again, and 1 week goes by, a month goes by, a year goes by, and that dua hasn't been answered. Therefore, Allah has denied my dua. But that's an incorrect understanding, because delay is not denial. As we mentioned several times, between the dua of Sayyidina Musa against Fir'aun and the destruction of Fir'aun was how many years? 40 years. 40 years. Was Allah Ta'ala denying Sayyidina Musa? Absolutely not. But Allah answers the dua in the time of His choosing, not our choosing. So in inspiring us to make the dua, it's answered. We just watch it unfold and marvel at Allah's power as He manifests. Alhamdulillah.